Are Chelsea Football Club set to fall foul of FFP regulations? Well, today, my friends, I'm here to discuss the reports doing the rounds right now. I'm going to go into detail. I'm going to give my subjective opinions and takes. And I mentioned this point at the start because I know that I have a lot of clued up viewers that watch the game. I've spoken to some of you guys on the call-in show. It will be coming back later this month. I think today, let's share ideas, how we're feeling, how we're thinking. This is the perfect opportunity to do so. So my friends, you know what to do already. Hit that like button and share your thoughts and opinions too, without wasting any more time. And I guess this falls in nicely with the final part of today's video. Are we set to go broke in the summer window? Are we set to fall foul of FFP regulations? Now, I'm sure all of you guys have seen the TalkSport clip that did the rounds on Twitter today, and it featured former Man City executive in Stefan Borson. And, in this clip, he talks about how, there are some real risks behind how we've looked to rebuild and remodel our football club with this massive $1 billion investment, because there is a potential for us to risk falling foul of FFP. As we know, we must raise over 100 million before the end of June, the 30th of June, to safeguard, obviously, our financial future. And we can't forget that with new FFP laws in the Premier League, it means that you can only sustain up to £105 million worth of losses over a 3-year period. And this 3-year period is getting closer and closer for us. Now, the club have communicated in the past that they feel confident that there's nothing to worry about, right? But I'm sure at the time there was belief that we'd be selling on a few more players than we actually have. And, we can't forget that things have been made a bit more difficult based on a lot of these investigations coming from Roman Abramovich's time as our owner, based on how we were dealing behind the scenes. There were a series of payments up to the tune of tens of £1 million that were, being routed through offshore accounts and vehicles that belonged to Roman Abramovich. And, of course, when you're getting found out for doing things like this behind the scenes, it means that our new owners have to, take that into consideration and bear the brunt of past misgivings. At the moment, many Premier League clubs are worried about FFP regulations. I think this was reflected in the window we saw in January. Compare it to last Jan, where over £1 billion was spent. And obviously we spent most of that money, but fast forward to this year and only 100 million was spent. Barely any clubs bought any players, because this is a real concern that most clubs are dealing with right now, and they don't want to fall foul to FFP. As you saw recently with Everton's massive point reduction, this could be the norm for many a football club based on this very risky approach to investing in their football clubs. So, I don't want to just say that what Borson's saying is absolute fear-mongering. Don't worry about it. The media's against us. I think that would just be a bit too naive to just dismiss that notion, right? We have to accept some reality behind our circumstances and understand that. Now, it doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It just means that we must work overtime right now to secure the sales of players. But in that TalkSport clip, there was a great example used by Borson, and it mentioned a Conor Gallagher. He gave a hypothetical situation of, okay, let's say you want to sell him before January. You have to remember there's a massive probability that he is going to become part of England's squad during the Euros. And if he's focused on his national team and on football, it's going to be very hard to agree a sale before that time, unless you're selling him for a massively reduced price compared to what you hope to pick up for him at the start of the year. And I think that's a very real example. And I feel like not only is Gallagher falling into that bracket, but many other players as well too. I'm sorry, when I saw Everton get that 10-point reduction, I knew that this rule is serious and clubs are going to finally get punished if they fall foul of breaching FFP right now. Nottingham Forest are potentially set to fall foul of these regulations too. Man City are being investigated. So many clubs are right now. It's getting really tense. And as I said, this is why this January window has been so quiet for most clubs, and very surprisingly, most clubs are turning towards using the players they're producing to help out in certain positions. And I'm sorry, you think this would have been one of the most common sense things that all clubs do, but when this is the richest league in the world with so many high expectations from investors and owners, it becomes a case of money over common sense so often. And listen, I'm kind of okay with clubs reaping the rewards for what they sow, right? And if you're going to continue to just overspend, there are consequences. And I can go in even deeper with this, because ultimately, who are paying the costs for this reckless use of money? It's us fans. We pay for that cost in the price of, Amazon fees and TNT sports fees and Sky sports fees, and the prices are rising time and time again. But remember, this is why the Premier League is earning billions from these TV right deals, because we pay into that because the market is there. So in a way, I kind of feel like this is a waste of the money we're pumping into the sport we love. And a lot of it is kind of wasted, and a lot of that money goes out in agent fees and goes to owners and goes to managers that have deals and this and that and all that type of stuff. And I slide to myself, come on, man, I don't think the game's supposed to be like this, in my opinion. But I can go into even more detail. Let me stay on topic with the video. I think the reality is, when we invested over $1 billion into rebuilding this team, it came with a lot of risk, and I think the best way the club found to subsidize that risk was by selling Cobham players, because you're selling these guys for pure profit, because they cost you nothing to make other than the wages you're paying them every single year, right? But yeah, to end things, I just hate to think that we found ourselves in this situation due to being allergic to embracing the talents we're producing. Because the reality is simply this: for all the guys that have been deemed not good enough to take us to the next level, we've bought how many players in that time, and we find ourselves falling lower and lower and lower. But my thing is, I feel like we're starting to use up all the Cobham resources that we have left, because there aren't many more like Tamoris or Abrahams or Mason Mounts. And once your Brogers go and your Gallagher's go and your Trevor Chalobah's go, who are the next players that can come in and be sold for substantial profit to help us buy players? Ideally, at the start of January, we had hopes to at least earn around 120 million by selling Broger and Gallagher for combined fees, right? And the reality is, Gallagher is still here. He won't be going for anywhere near the amount we want in the summer. Why? Because his contract is also coming to an end. He hasn't agreed upon signing any extension. So this was the window of opportunity to earn the maximum amount of money for a Gallagher sale. And obviously, Broger's potential future fee is fully reliant behind how he performs until the end of the season for Fulham. The reality is, the market is not as big as it used to be. The Premier League has most of the money, but now most Prem clubs aren't looking to spend recklessly like seasons before. And in Europe, how many European clubs can afford to buy someone for 50 million unless it's the very, very big clubs? And even then, some of them are struggling now. And I think one of the last realities to remember, and I know I'm sounding a bit doom and gloom, but not everything's going to be a nice story, right? Obviously, we have a lot of players that we still need to offload. Yes, players like your Matsons and Coles have left on loan, but there are no obligations to buy in the end. There's no guarantees we're set to earn money. They're not going to, activate certain clauses after playing 10 games, etc., etc. The reality is, we're still needing to earn money for most of these loan moves. Then remember the fact that Lukaku, yes, there's an obligation to buy in that deal, but if Roma can't afford him, you're hoping that a Saudi club can. And what if they don't want him anymore? You're looking at Hakim Ziyech, who is still out on loan with Galatasaray. You're looking at Lewis Hall as well too. We thought we'd be earning around 30 million guarantee, but now that's looking like that could be a myth right now. I mean, Kepa, Lewis Hall, you can go on. So there's a ton of work in place when it comes to selling essentially a squad's worth of players. And like I said, it's not necessarily the end of the club, because if we can earn money for most of these sales, you're looking at your Trevor Chalobahs, Gallagher's, Brogers, plus the rest of them, that's surely set to be at least over 150 million guaranteed. But I can't help but feel like we've put ourselves in this difficult situation for absolutely no reason. And listen, I'm not looking towards your Enzo Fernandez's, Caicedo's, and other players like Mudryk as examples of us being too risky in the market and being silly with our money. In fact, I'm looking at your signings of your Disassis. I'm looking at your Washingtons, your Igor Chukwus, Kukureas, and maybe I might sound mad, but maybe even your Romeo Lavias, because the combined fees for all these players was around 210 million pounds. And you're telling me right now we couldn't have just used what we already had at this football club and saved on that money, and then maybe use that money on a position we really need, like a striker? I can't help we've overspent in terms of signing players. And the ironic thing is that, let's say you didn't sign a Disassi, for example, this could have been an opportunity for Humphreys. And listen, if you're that dead set on selling every common grad that comes from the club, if Humphreys is getting game time, that's going to boost his value, that's going to boost his interest, and in a sense, you're creating that model of selling common grads for big money to then sign new players who have a 50% hit or miss rate. So I feel like based on how aggressive we've been, we are kind of denying what we can earn in the future, right? Because once we exhaust all these players, who else is coming through that's going to be sold for 30, 20 million from our academy? We're not seeing it now. Yeah, I get it. I know I'm kind of continuing this example. I've made my point already. But when you're spending first team squad money on signing squad positions, when you have one of the best academies in Europe that has regularly shown that they produce players who are of the caliber to perform for your first team in squad roles or whatever, I feel like you should accept and embrace the risk that comes from that. And I feel like we've signed a lot of squad players for super inflated fees that were never needed to begin with. And I feel like maybe we find ourselves in this position because we're giving the keys to the club to two sporting directors that don't have any real ties to the club. They want to kind of just show to the consortium, listen, you bought us for a reason. We want to run the club in our exact entire image. It looks better on our CV if the players we're signing are performing compared to using whatever the club's producing right now. These are some of the risks that can come in the future if things don't work out. Signing a Leslie when you're not even getting blue card to sign him for Strasbourg, when you just signed Casaide and Andre Santos, I'm sorry, it's overkill. Because guaranteed at least 3 or 2 of these guys won't be here in 18 to 24 months time. You want to sell Ian Maatsen, who's doing absolute mad things with Dortmund right now, when we need an attacking left back of his dimensions to only go back into the market to sign someone else. And it's like, will this future signing at left back be levels above Maatsen? Most likely not. Listen, we're stuck in this situation right now, but I like to talk about these things to understand how we get ourselves in these situations, and I hope and pray that we can minimize making these same type of risky mistakes again, because a lot is riding on this summer, because this must be the final window that we address the concerns in the squad to finally become a Champions League contending team. Because if we don't make seal again for the 3rd year in a row, my friends, then it's time to really start to panic, yeah? So there are some of my thoughts and observations. I mean, I could talk about this particular story in even greater detail, but I think right now, this is a perfect segue to allow you guys to share your ideas, your thoughts and opinions. I know that a lot of you guys are really clued up with your football, so please don't hold back. Share how you feel about the situation, and let's kind of understand how each other's feeling about things right now. So on that note, I'm Nini FC, this is BlueLionsTV. I'll see you guys later with some more videos.